Committee on Oversight and Government Reform will come to order, and pursuant to Committee Rule 5B and House Rule 11-2H4, the Chair announces that he may postpone further proceedings today on any question of approving any measure or matter or adopting an amendment on which a recorded vote or the yeas and nays are ordered. And without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. Our first item, we have a number of bills today that we're going to get to. We have a series of votes that will interrupt us from time to time. Bear with us as we get through this process last week before the recess, but we have some very important bills. In particular, this first item for consideration, which is H.R. 5714, the Postal Service Reform Act of 2016. The clerk will designate the bill.
H.R. 5714, the Postal Service Reform Act of 2016.
I ask unanimous consent that the bill be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. Now I'd like to recognize myself to explain the piece of legislation. And let me start by saying that we have had a very good, robust working discussion that's really gone through the years on the need for postal reform. In particular, my work here with Congressman Cummings, Congressman Meadows of North Carolina, Congressman Conley and Lynch from Virginia and Massachusetts has been very productive. There has been some give and take on both sides of the aisle, but the need and the imperative to actually institute meaningful reform. My take, my vision, my view of the Postal Service is that it is a vital tool of commerce. It's actually something in the Constitution that we're actually supposed to be doing around here. All too often we're working on things that don't, I think, fit the need and the scope of what the government's doing, but there's a reason why this was included in the Constitution. This legislation makes reforms to the United States Postal Service to promote its solvency and ensure reliable mail service to the nation. Specifically, the bill requires postal retirees to fully enroll in Medicare, streamlines Postal Service governance, promotes greater use of more cost-effective and secure means of delivery, and allows the Postal Service to offer a wider array of governmental services. There are members on both sides of the aisle that support this bill for a variety of different reasons, and I'm sure as members look at this complex situation, there will be some that will be opposed. I would not surprise me whatsoever. But let's understand the dire situation that we are in. The Postal Service has $125 billion in unfunded liabilities, including more than $54 billion for retiree health care, $24 billion for pensions, and $18 billion for workers' compensation. Liabilities like these would be a struggle for even the healthiest of companies, but for the Postal Service, which has seen its mail volume drop by more than 25% since 2006 alone, these unfunded liabilities must be addressed. I don't know of anybody that simply, at least on the Republican side of the aisle, that simply wants a bailout. There are some that say, well, let it just crash and burn, take it into bankruptcy, let it just fail. Really? Every single American relies on this. I believe that the Postal Service is a competitive advantage for the United States of America. It is how commerce works today, and I have personally come a long way. I started in many ways by saying that, well, okay, let's cut costs, and I still believe that we need to cut costs. I started by thinking that maybe 5-day delivery or postal holidays would be the way to go, but that's not the way the world's going. The world's going to 7-day delivery. Look at what Amazon and others are doing. The e-commerce world is exploding and continues to explode, and I think during the course of my lifetime, it's just unparalleled. Postal Service can be a vital tool in that array of commerce. I don't think that you actually get to the finish line by simply and only cutting expenses and services and raising rates. It is more complex than that. Any good business model would tell you that the Postal Service needs to become more competitive. It has a monopoly. It should be able to compete on many, many forms. There have been mass revenue loss. You don't grow the Postal Service by just growing or expanding their rates. And we have to be realistic on how we deal with the future of the Postal Service as it tries to get into its modernization that it so desperately needs. Let's also understand that the Postal Service has already defaulted on 5 straight multi-billion-dollar payments required to pre-fund retiree health care benefits already earned by its employees. Defaulted. I take issue with those that say that default is the right way to deal with this issue. I don't think that putting into receivership and creating an unappointed board with people that will make some dramatic alterations is going to be something that anybody in any way, shape, or form is going to like. Nevertheless, are there multi-billion-dollar adjustments that need to be to put it on its track without doing a bailout, which is so imperative to me? Without doing a bailout, yes, I do believe we can do that. Despite major internal reforms at the Postal Service over the last several years, where they have literally hundreds of thousands of less personnel than they did before, legislative reform is necessary to bring solvency back to the agency. I guess if you had to summarize, at least from my vantage point, the number one thing we want to get to is solvency. We have been working together in a good collaborative bipartisan way to get from here to there, but it's not an easy road. It's taken some 18 months. Last month, we released a discussion draft of the bill. We invited feedback from the entire array of members, interests that are out there. We've been listening to that feedback. There have been some small and minor changes. I don't think anything of major significance has changed since that discussion draft went out there. And I'd like to thank all of the people from the interested parties, the unions, members who have expressed interest on certain ideas. One of the imperatives for today and this week in getting this bill passed, quite frankly, is to get a CBO score. A Congressional Budget Office review will be taken very seriously if we're able to pass a bill out of committee. Now, members have to vote their conscience. I want them to do what they want to do. They are independent in how they approach this, but I will tell you that there are several of us that feel like in order to really get to the point where we understand the impact and how the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, will assess this, passing this bill out of committee today is a vital part and step in that right direction. There will inevitably be some alteration or understanding. How the CBO scores things is not something I'm a big fan of. I think they do some things quite well, but there are other things that really leave you scratching your head. Again, I want to encourage members to vote for this bill. I think it's a good bill, but I want them to also do what they feel is in their best interest. My goal is to do the best we can to get a major reform bill enacted this year. And by considering this bill today, we will be able to spend the summer working with Ways and Means as we address the Medicare-related provisions on the bill. And by the way, I do need to note on the Medicare provision, I am a huge fan and believe that it is absolutely and totally necessary to reform Medicare. Medicare, Medicaid, I put them all up there. They all need reform. But let's also understand that postal employees have paid some $29 billion into the system, and they should be able to get some of those benefits as well. So again, I urge the passage of this bill and yield back my time, which I've gone way past, and now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Cummings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to begin by thanking you, Mr. Chairman, for your tremendous leadership on this issue. We would not be here today if you had not made postal reform a personal top priority, and I do thank you. I also thank my colleagues, Congressman Meadows, Congressman Connolly, and Congressman Lynch, for their extraordinary work on this measure and for their commitment to crafting a bipartisan bill that we can all support. The bill before us is the product of intense negotiations that have been ongoing for months, and is the culmination of broader efforts that have been underway for years. Under Chairman Chaffetz's leadership, the committee posted a draft bill 2 weeks ago in order to give stakeholders the public opportunity to provide comments before the committee considered the bill. We received comments from nearly 50 organizations and entities and nearly 150 members of the public. For all of you who contributed, we thank you. We've carefully reviewed each comment, and we have made many important alterations to the draft text in response to those comments. I want to be clear. The bill before us is not perfect. Let me repeat that. The bill before us is not perfect, but it is a very good bill that is a product of reasonable compromises made by both sides in the pursuit of our shared goal of placing the Postal Service on sustainable financial footing. I've often said that as much as I would like to reach common ground is often not enough. In this instance, we must reach higher ground, and I believe that this bill does that. Critically, this bill gives us what is likely the only chance we have in Congress to enact, in this Congress, to enact meaningful postal reform. I want to highlight some of the changes that were made to the draft. The bill would ensure that all retirees who are eligible for Medicare will be enrolled in Medicare automatically. Let me just explain that the postal retirees have already paid for Medicare, but some are not receiving a benefit. As the Chairman said, paid to the tune of some $29 billion. By ensuring all postal retirees benefit from Medicare, this bill will eliminate the retiree health care benefits payment that have left the postal system with an approximately $49 billion liability. Without this change, the Postal Service cannot achieve financial stability. This bill also adds provisions creating a Medicare education program to ensure that all retirees and employees understand how the postal health insurance plans and Medicare will work together. The bill would ensure that a transition fund will be created to help newly enrolled retirees pay some of their premiums in the first 3 years. Many new enrollees may see reductions in their total out-of-pocket health care expenditures once they enroll in Medicare. For others, enrollment in Medicare may cause increases. So it was critical to me and my colleagues on this side and the other side that we provide some assistance to help address those increases. Employees who retired under the Civil Service Retirement System before 1984 and are not eligible for Social Security will not be affected by this bill. This bill would streamline and strengthen postal governance, but unlike the draft bill, it would not make the Postmaster General or the Deputy Postmaster General subject to Senate confirmation. Instead, the bill would shrink the Board of Governors and vest in it responsibility for setting overall strategy and approving prices and products. The bill would vest day-to-day executive authority in the Postmaster General. The bill would add in a requirement for the Inspector General to conduct cost-benefits analysis 2 and 5 years after the initiation of programs to convert addresses to centralized delivery so we can know the true effects of these conversions. The bill would make revisions responding to the many comments we received about the rate setting and cost attribution processes. So I wish we had been able to expand the Postal Service's authority to offer non-postal products, but I'm pleased that the bill would create the Chief Innovation Officer position, something for which I've been fighting throughout the past 5 years. This bill would give to supervisory and technical employees the right to appeal adverse personnel actions to the Merit Systems Protection Board, something for which Mr. Connolly has fought tirelessly. As I close, let me be clear that the continued delay in the enactment of postal reform is simply not an option. I've often said that the American people get frustrated when we do not address those issues that go to the center of their lives. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no issue that I can think of that go to the center of every single American's life than our postal system. So the threats to the Postal Service's financial condition are clear, and guess what? They are imminent. And if we do not enable the Postal Service to cut costs and obtain additional revenue, a liquidity crisis will be unavoidable. And I think that when I think about Mr. Connolly, when I think about Mr. Meadows, and certainly Mr. Lynch and the chairman of our committee, when we came together, we came with that understanding. And I think that that's why we worked together. We did some bending and convincing and some compromising to try to come up with something that, again, would take us to higher ground. And so enacting postal reform in this Congress is urgent. And I hope all of my colleagues will join us in supporting this bill. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize the chairman of the subcommittee who's worked so diligently on this, Mr. Meadows of North Carolina. Recognize him for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate your leadership and obviously the leadership of Ranking Member Cummings for the desire to get this done. And I look out to many of the stakeholders, and really what I know about postal reform comes from many of you. And I want to just say thank you. The best way that you can get a friend here in Washington, D.C. is to tell them that you're looking at postal reform. But the best way to lose those same friends is to get a bipartisan bill that you're going to move forward, because all of a sudden all your friends seem to disappear because they have something that is there that they wish were addressed and perhaps is not getting addressed. Here's my commitment to many of you who are here today, and obviously to the chairman, is we're going to continue to work hard to not only get a good CBO score, one that will put this bill across the finish line, but continue to work in a bipartisan way to address some of the issues that perhaps are still out there lingering. And by doing that, you have my commitment that I will never tell you that I'm going to deal with something if I'm not going to deal with it. One of the great things is I don't bluff. I'll say, yes, we're willing to do that. That's a maybe and that's a no. But I also want to say that the chairman and the staff has worked so incredibly hard to try to find that middle ground. We had two options. We could have a bailout of some $60 billion when it'll all be said and done, and a greater governance that would suggest that we completely transform everything and say we'll just bail it out and put a governance body in there. Or that we could come up with a bill like this that would give and take from different situations and hopefully put it on a path to not only fiscal soundness, but also one in what the postal system should be for all Americans, and that is a postal system that delivers mail and other packages and periodicals on a timely basis with a service standard that we can all count on. And I see the Deputy Postmaster General shaking his head, and as we look at that, that is a key component as we look at service standards and the governance that we have. We broke it down into 3 different areas, and those 3 areas really looked at postal operations reform, personnel reforms, and postal benefit reforms, and it went in those 3 categories. And so as we start to look at that, we've expanded the scope of the Postal Regulatory Commission to allow them to have greater control over certain aspects of this particular decision-making. One of the gives that we had is in the original text was making, as the ranking member talked about, a cabinet position out of Postmaster General going back to pre-1971, 1970 dates. And indeed, we made modifications, streamlined that particular operation to, and really in response to many of you. We've agreed, obviously, for a rate increase that is half of what it used to be. And so for me, I see that as actually a rate reduction, even though some of you will claim exactly the opposite of that. And as we start to look at all of these things, I would encourage you to continue to stay involved. I know that Senator Heitkamp has called on a number of areas that are important to some of the rural communities. We must have the rural communities involved in this. My commitment to her is to continue to work in a real way with her. She has been very active and vocal on this particular issue, and so we're working with that. And Mr. Chairman, I would be remiss without mentioning the fact that there are a lot of small things that are important in an extreme way to some of the stakeholders that are here. You committed to me the other day, and I know our staff has committed to continue to try to work through clarifying language as we work through this for technical changes as we try to make this bill not only viable, but one that we can all look back 6 to 10 years from now and applaud. So I just thank you for your leadership, and with that, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. We'll now recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Conley, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We Catholics, when we elect a new pope, there's white smoke from the Sistine Chapel, and the new pope, the announcement that there is a new pope is in Latin. They say, habemus papam, we have a pope. So today, habemus legislatum postalum reformum. We have a postal reform bill. And then we would say in Latin, Deo gratias, thanks be to God. But my hat is off to the chairman and the ranking member for their leadership, and my colleague, Mr. Meadows, for his leadership and friendship, and my friend from Massachusetts, Mr. Lynch. Forging a compromise with as many moving parts as this compromise ain't easy. That's not Latin. That's English. Ain't. Lots of stakeholders, lots of concerns. Plus, we don't always control our own fate. If we had our way, we'd do it differently. But as the chairman indicated, we have constraints on us from the CBO, which I think it's a mystery between the CBO and God, how they score some things, and why they score some things, and the rationale for it. But we don't get to appeal that. And so we had to work within those constraints. And the chairman decided to set a different tone on this bill this year. We stopped fighting about the marginal. So we didn't fight anymore about 6 versus 5, and as the chairman's pointed out, actually we're moving to 7. There were false savings being promised by 6 versus 5. So let's deal with the big stuff we can control. And the 5 of us got together, consulting with all of our colleagues, and tried to address those big things. The prepayment problem. Out of that emerged how we deal with medical care and the role of Medicare for active and retired postal employees that gets us out of insolvency, gets us out of the prepayment problem without a bailout, because that couldn't be sold on the other side of the aisle. I mean, if I had my way, we'd have a straight-out repeal of the 2006 legislation, and let's move on. But that wasn't so easy, and thus what we found here. We stopped fighting about workers' rights. So there's no language in here repealing collective bargaining. We gingerly worked on the issue of cluster boxes. So it's not the mandate, absolute fiat mandate that was contained in previous legislation, but there's a provision in here guiding how we move forward that will yield savings that can be scored in trying to promote this bill on a bipartisan basis. Compromise means give and take. Compromise means you don't get everything you want. Compromise means we sometimes have to shave and tailor the ideal. But if we're going to have postal reform in our lifetime, this vehicle is it. If we can hold this bipartisan compromise together, I believe we can take this bill to the floor. Now, between now and then, maybe we can perfect it some more. And I believe that if that happens, there's hope on the Senate to move there too. We can't be satisfied with the status quo. We're hemorrhaging, it's not viable, and it will lead to far worse alternatives than anything contemplated in this bill. And so I hope stakeholders will approach it that way. I hope my colleagues on both sides of the aisle will approach it that way, because that was the spirit in which all of us, in trying to put together this bill, approached it. And finally, I want to thank our staffs, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Ranking Member. They provided incredibly professional work, and I think we're really a credit to what it means to be professional staff, personal and committee, in working through this bill. With that, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman, and I particularly concur with the comments about the staff on both sides of the aisle. It's been a working, collaborative process that has gone for more than a year and has been very productive in moving forward, and that's a credit to the staff and their ability to act in a professional and meaningful way. I'd now like to also recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Lynch, for 5 minutes.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to begin by thanking you. You've, I think, been as important to the compromise that we arrived at today at the end of this process as anyone. And I know that you cited yourself the change of heart and opinion about going to 5-day delivery, and now we're realistically embracing 7-day and trying to align the mission of the Postal Service with the needs of the consumer out there and postal customers. So I can honestly say that the Postal Service Reform Act of 2016 is the product of a genuine partnership and bipartisanship and a shared commitment to ensuring that our most trusted government institutions, the United States Postal Service, is able to continue its vital public mission to provide postal services that bind the nation together through the correspondence of the people. That is its mission. It's also reflective of the meaningful input that we've received from our coalition of postal and federal employee unions, management organizations, mailers, and the Postmaster General and the Post Office itself, all of whom have been working in support of a sensible postal reform. But this has really been a team effort. And I also want to acknowledge the hard work by Ranking Member Cummings. On our side, really corralling people who had a menu of opinions, and some of those in a constructive direction, some of them not so much. But he was able, through reason, I think, and hard work and persistence, to stay at it. And when necessary, delegated a lot of responsibility to Jerry Connolly, who worked with Mark Meadows, and it was a real team approach. And I'm proud of the product that we've come up with here. I think it's a good work product. It's a real credit to the people who have worked on it. This legislation also follows months of, probably years of negotiation, considering where we came from. I think this bill is focused on those common sense areas of reform that we can agree would place the Postal Service on a much more stable financial footing. And like any agreement, this is not perfect, and I certainly welcome the additional feedback that our postal stakeholders and members on both sides of the aisle in the House and Senate may have as this legislation moves forward. But it will move forward, and that's not happened in my recent memory. However, I do believe this bill provides us with a key and long-awaited opportunity to address some of the most outstanding challenges facing an agency that has been noted, reported 9 consecutive years of net losses. We cannot continue that. It has accumulated a net deficit of $56.8 billion. It's approaching the level of some countries in terms of their unfunded liabilities and deficit. And they've also experienced a significant decline in first-class mail volume from 97.7 billion pieces in 2006, before the recession, to 62 billion pieces last year. If this was a private company, it would be going out of business. So we cannot continue the status quo. Something has to change here. It either can change volitionally by our highest and best recommendations, or it can simply be some type of dismantling or some type of ad hoc bankruptcy that occurs here. And I as well reject any notion that default might be a preferred option here. Most notably, I think the Postal Service Reform Act will finally allow the Postal Service and its employees to carry out their mission free of the unwarranted financial burden imposed by the so-called pre-funding requirement imposed by current law. That is the onerous mandate included in the Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act requiring the agency to pre-fund health care costs for future retirees on an accelerated payment schedule years before it is necessary. In the decades since, the Postal Service and our community of postal stakeholders have strongly urged Congress to repeal this provision, which is exclusively imposed on this one government agency that relies solely on the revenue generated by stamps. They don't receive an appropriation. All their revenue is provided by selling stamps, basically. And according to the Government Accountability Office, this unprecedented mandate has left the Postal Service with a corresponding unfunded liability of over $50 billion. This bill will eliminate the unfunded liability and the corresponding average annual payment of $5.5 billion that the Postal Service has been required to pay into funding its future retiree health benefits since 2007. This bill will erase the liability by simply requiring the full integration of postal health care and the FEHBP with the Medicare program. Medicare integration was the chief recommendation included in the joint reform agreement issued by the Postal Service, the 4 major postal unions, and key mailing industry associations in December of 2015. In particular, H.R. 5714 will establish postal-specific health care plans within Federal Employees Health Benefit Program that will be fully coordinated and share costs with Medicare. While the Postal Service reports that its employees now have contributed over $29 billion to Medicare since 1983, many postal retirees are not even drawing on the benefits that they've already paid for. That's because current law does not require them to enroll in Medicare once they're eligible. As we've learned during the course of our previous hearings on the Postal Service financial situation, the lack of Medicare integration between the postal health care system and Medicare does not reflect private sector best practices, and it stands in stark contrast to the manner in which the Department of Defense shares its TRICARE retiree health care costs with Medicare. Full integration will therefore allow Medicare to serve as the primary insurer for eligible postal retirees and significantly reduce the agency's share of retiree health care costs. According to its most recent annual financial filing, the Postal Service reported health care costs for the fiscal year 2015, get this, totaling $13.6 billion, including $8.8 billion in retiree health costs alone. Medicare integration is a critical element of common-sense postal reform, and its implementation is at the core of this bipartisan agreement. Mr. Chairman, again, I want to commend you, Ranking Member Cummings, Chairman Meadows, and Ranking Member Conley for your leadership and hard work as we continue to work towards a path for reform on a bipartisan basis. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to strongly support the Postal Service Reform Act of 2016, and I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Does any other member wish to speak on the bill? Gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welsh.
I just moved to strike the last word. First of all, I just want to understand something. Are we actually going to get something done? I want to thank all, it's a welcome relief, and I want to thank all of the folks who have spoken for this incredible accomplishment. I also want to thank the postal workers. When this has been an issue of enormous concern for all of us, and all of us, I think, have been meeting with the postal workers in our communities. And it's been a life-death kind of struggle for those folks because, by and large, they're really committed to the service that dates back to before the founding of this country, getting the mail to the people at their homes and at their businesses. And they've had these enormous challenges along the way to try not just to fight for their jobs, but to fight for the reputation of the Postal Service and the postal workers to deliver the mail. And a lot of us probably had the chance to go out in the course of this on a postal delivery route with some of our postal carriers in our districts. And it's hard work. And the postal workers I've met do it with a bounce in their step. They're pretty cheerful. They know the neighborhood. They know the dogs. They get along with most of them. They know the neighbors, and it was impressive to me to see how people that were home were so excited to have this interaction to break up their day and bring them a little bit of human warmth along with the mail. So, and in all of this, we've had to contend with the financial challenges that were real. Some of them really aggravated, I think, by some policies that you're addressing in this legislation. Some of them with the enormous pressures of technology and email. And it required wrenching adjustment on the part of the management, on the part of the postal carriers. When we got out of the rhetoric and into trying to focus on the practical issues that our leaders here on this committee did, we started to make progress. But it couldn't have been done without the full cooperation of the folks in the Postal Service, for whom it's not just a job, it's really kind of a way of life. So this has been a long, hard challenge, and I want to salute all who've been involved in this. There's going to be issues that when I spoke to our postal carriers, they had some practical concerns about the cluster boxes, about some of the terms of this, but I think that they understand that the world we're in, where it's so difficult to get the Republicans and the Democrats on the same page and getting the yes on a tough issue, that this represents some stability that will give us a chance, I think, to move forward. But I just want to say now to the postal folks who are here, thank you for your hanging in there all these years, and thank you for your participation in this process, and my best hope is that it gets better as we move ahead. So
The gentleman will yield.
I yield back.
I do, if you, the gentleman yield?
Yes, I do.
It is duly noted, the work and the interaction with the unions. Believe me, Mark Meadows and I can both testify that they, at several instances, were beating down our doors and fighting for their membership. I think what ultimately won the day, though, I hope, and we're not there yet, I mean, this is but one step in several steps to get from here to there, is the idea and the commitment that both myself, Mark Meadows, and others had. We want to grow the membership. We don't want to shrink it. We want the post office to be vibrant. We want it to be growing. We want it to be relevant. It's something that we do that actually touches every American. And we have different ways and methods to get there. But we want the post office to grow, not just shrink it into oblivion. And I think they understood that, if I can make a sweeping generalization. There's still parts that they are challenged with. But I think you could take almost anybody who has a vested interest and say, all right, we're coming to the table here with a genuine interest in solving this and not doing a government taxpayer-funded bailout. You know, what's amazing about this, what I try to tell my conservative colleagues is they don't get an appropriation. We're trying to avoid an appropriation here. We're trying to actually put them on a pathway to solvency, and that's, again, my driving point here. So the gentleman yields back. Are there any other members wish to speak on the bill? Are there any amendments to the bill? Gentlewoman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to be on the record. I'm done my research. I am the only member of Congress to have 30 years of postal service, starting from a letter carrier, actually running from the good dogs and bad dogs.
No wonder we like you.
Yeah, that's you like me. So throughout the years, going up through the ranks, from letter carrier clerk to supervisor to management, and retiring from the Postal Service in a management position, the conversation on the need for postal reform has been real. I started my career a few years after we transformed from the post office to the Postal Service. And during those early years, it was all the excitement about the transformation and the new freedoms that the Postal Service had achieved during that time. There has never been a time that the need for postal reform has been low on our minds as during that time when I had my career with the Postal Service. But I am offering an amendment, and I plan to withdraw it. However, I want to explain how important it is. As many of you know, my respect and sensitivity to the retired postal employees is real for active as well. I've asked on several occasions to discuss my concerns about postal reform, as I have a few objections. I, too, have personal relationships with members of the unions, and I'm very thankful for the current leadership of the Postal Service being respectful of my position here currently, grouped with my actual affiliation with the postal family, as we call ourselves. The Postal Reform Act of 2016 will require postal employees and retirees to enroll in Medicare or forfeit the Federal Employees Health Benefits Program coverage as they earned for many years as a benefit. For those not enrolled, this would require an additional $121.80 per month or more in Medicare Plan B premiums, something many postal retirees neither want or can afford. As a result, this bill would automatically enroll about 76,000 current postal retirees in Medicare Plan B, therefore taking away their choice. My amendment would have provided a simple alternative that would preserve both choice for current postal retirees and substantial savings for the Postal Service. It would have maintained automatic enrollment of current postal retirees in Medicare Plan B, but provide them with a short-term opt-out window of 90 days. Without this option, the bill would replace postal retirees' choice of health insurance and at a significant cost to the Medicare program. Having said this, I, more than most, desire to see postal reform happen this year. And I join my colleagues in saying the leadership of our chairman and of my ranking member on this issue. I can't tell you how many times during those years being in the Postal Service that we were so concerned that there was a deaf ear being placed to the predicament and situation of the Postal Service without leadership. Today, you're seeing that leadership. I asked for this committee because I knew that one of the jobs that I needed to do is to be able to have a vote on postal reform. And so this is a very enlightening and a happy day for me. But having said that, I desire to see the postal reform, and I want to save the Postal Service and ensure its viability for years to come. So it's in that vein, I will withdraw this amendment, Mr. Chairman. However, I want to say on the record that I do not believe that a bad bill is better than no bill. And I hope that before this bill comes to the floor for final passage, I am able to work with my colleagues to see my concerns and the concerns of NARFE addressed. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I withdraw my amendment, and I say this.
Would my friend yield?
Who's asking? Mr. Conley, yes.
I just want to assure my friend, I thank her for her leadership and her knowledge, base, and experience, and certainly I think we will do everything we can to work with you between now and when this bill comes to the floor. I have met multiple times with NARF and will continue to do so and work with my dear friend from Michigan. Thank you.
I want to say thank you, and again, to all the postal employees, to whatever area that you represent. I am so grateful for your continued leadership and commitment to providing a service to these United States of America that we take an oath and as an employee to provide and to protect the mail of the United States of America. So thank you. I yield back, sir.
The gentlewoman yields back. I think it was actually the voice of God that was coming from behind you based on previous comments from the gentleman from Virginia.
One more Latin phrase, mirabile dictu, we have a bill, wondrous to relate. Very unusual.
We'll get that translated into the record at some point. Does any other member wish to offer an amendment? Does any other member wish to offer a statement on the bill, or does any other member wish to offer an amendment to the bill? If none, the question is now on the adoption and favorably reporting H.R. 5714 to the House of Representatives. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it, and the bill is ordered favorably reported. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Our next item under consideration is H.R. 5707, the Postal Service Financial Improvement Act of 2016. The clerk will designate the bill.
H.R. 5707, the Postal Service Financial Improvement Act of 2016.
I ask unanimous consent that the bill be considered as read and open for amendment at any point without objection, so ordered. I'd now like to recognize the sponsor of the bill, the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Lynch, for 5 minutes to explain this piece of legislation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that, and I want to thank the ranking member as well. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just go over this bill. Like our broader postal reform package, this bill, H.R. 5707, is the product of a truly bipartisan effort to enhance the financial stability of the United States Postal Service. Representative David McKinley of West Virginia is the lead Republican co-sponsor of this bill, and I'd like to thank him for his leadership and great work on this issue. The Postal Service Financial Improvement Act would authorize the Secretary of the Treasury to adopt a more sensible and beneficial investment strategy when investing assets from the Postal Retiree Health Benefits Fund. Current law limits the Secretary of the Treasury to investing in anything other than U.S. Treasury securities, and these are government-guaranteed notes, bonds, and other securities that have a very low rate of return. As reported by the Treasury Department, 10-year Treasury notes are currently yielding less than 1.5%. In return, 20-year notes are yielding an estimated 1.7%, and 30-year notes are yielding approximately 2%. This investment strategy is not in line with the investment structure of the Federal Thrift Savings Plan, the Defined Contribution Retirement Plan for federal employees and members of the Uniformed Armed Services that is widely recognized as a model of efficiency and low-cost savings. Thrift Savings Plan investment is not restricted to government securities, but rather includes additional specified index fund options that yield higher annual rates of return. The current manner in which the Secretary invests Postal Retiree Health Benefit Fund assets also contrasts with the more practical investment portfolios available through other federal sector programs, including the National Railroad Retirement Investment Fund, covering railroad industry employee retirement. While investment of the Railroad Trust was previously limited to government securities, Congress did authorize it to diversify its portfolio via enactment of the 2001 Railroad Retirement and Survivors Improvement Act. In order to strengthen investment of the Postal Retiree Health Benefit Fund in a common sense and responsible manner, this bill, H.R. 5707, would authorize the Secretary of the Treasury to invest 25% of fund portions, those that are not being used for immediate fund payments, in index funds, modeled after those established within the Federal Thrift Savings Plan. In exercising this authority, the bill would require the Secretary to consult with one or more qualified professional asset managers, as well as a Postal Service Retiree Health Benefits Fund Investment Committee established by H.R. 5707. This committee would consist of the Secretary, the Chairman of the Postal Board of Governors, the Chairman of the Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board, and 2 presidentially appointed members who are experts in financial investment management and would represent the interest of postal employees and retirees. Moreover, this bill would require the Secretary to bring in an independent, qualified public accountant on a yearly basis to audit fund investments and annually report to Congress on the account's audited findings. H.R. 5707 would also authorize the Postal Investment Committee to modestly increase the percentage of diversified fund investments 5 years after enactment. However, it would strictly cap the percentage at 30%. Mr. Chairman, looking back historically, if we had allowed this type of investment in the past and comparing the performance of the Railroad Retirement Fund that was given that flexibility, it would have been currently, the corpus of the current fund would have been increased between $5 and $8 billion compared to its current balance. I want to thank you again for your continued willingness to work with us, and I want to thank Mr. McKinley again on this legislation as it moves forward to the House floor. We will also continue to work with our postal stakeholders in order to further incorporate any other input they may have on this bill. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. The Chair would like to advise members it is the intention of the Chair to complete the markup of this particular bill. We will then go into recess. We have a vote on the floor with less than 11 minutes to go. That vote series will take us, and we will restart the committee no sooner than 4:30 p.m. With that, let us now recognize Mr. Meadows in North Carolina on the bill.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be very brief. Mr. Lynch and Mr. McKinley both have worked very closely along with this committee to look at investment options for some of the Postal Service's financial issues that relate to investing of their financial resources. We certainly support that. There obviously are some concerns about cost and CBO scores, but I'm committed to work in a bipartisan way as we address this particular issue. I think it was a great compromise. I urge all of my colleagues to support it, and I'll yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Our intention was to originally include this provision in the base bill of the bill that we just passed out of committee. We are of utmost concern on how the CBO might score this particular provision. It seems ridiculous to us to pull this money out, make this investment, that they would score that as withdrawal, and we're going to have to fight that with the CBO. The mutual decision, quite frankly, is to pull it out as a separate bill. My goal and intention, I think Mr. Meadows, if it's fair to assert, would love to do this. I would love to do this, but we're going to have to fight this with the Congressional Budget Office. I think it's a good bill. I urge its passage. Does any other member wish to speak on this particular bill? Does any member have an amendment to this bill? If none, the question is now on the adoption and favorably reporting 5707 to the House of Representatives. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The bill is ordered favorably reported. Without objection, the motion to reconsider it is laid on the table. Committee will stand in recess. We will reconvene no sooner than 4:30. If votes are continuing, we will go to the conclusion of those votes. The committee stands in recess.